Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to speak on sustainable buildings. So, when we abbreviate it, we can even call it as a sustainable built form. Now, the world is about optimizing. The key word is not to waste. Kaizen, so many initiatives. You look at the Japanese, you look at the Germans, you look at anyone, they are all looking for more from less, beneficial to the environment, betterment to the ecosystem. So, in a normal, formal, traditional construction, as we are given to understand, you will find that there are trucks and lorries that come and take the waste. It is called as malwa. And many times you will be finding that waste is gone and dumped at a particular place where it becomes another enterprise to remove that waste from there when the time comes. Or if that waste is going to be just put in a pit and filled up, it is going to be an obstruction for the very sustainable return system of the earth fill and its ecosystem in that very spot. Sir, what do you think are the opportunities available in regular construction to cut corners or to improve the usability, the employability of materials by ensuring that you obtain more from less? If you can throw some light in a minute, please.
I think the thing has to begin with the design itself. First of all, right in design, and pandemic has very well taught us that how can we optimize, how we were able to live so well with very frugal space standards, multiple use of space, and the less as becoming quite more for that particular moment. So I think learning from that, the lessons of humility, frugality and sustainability, I think all design decisions have to take into account the kind of resource optimization. So starting with the space itself, that do we need certain kind of space which otherwise we use once in a while, can we not use it multiply? Also, land is a very reproductive resource. If you go to the earliest civilization, even though there were enough land and very few people, we built so optimally. We shared three sides of the wall, which climatically also helped, as well as in a less area, we were to have a very nice, dense neighborhood. Same thing continued even in the medieval times, where even for defense, we had less footprint, and in less area, we were able to have many more people living. So we left land for productive resources, and for passive purposes like habitation, we optimized it.
Beautiful. Dr. Pandya, taking it from there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's important, as he has said quickly, to recap, that probably we are moving away from how our forefathers were caring for the Mother Earth and for limited resources. Land is limited. The more you go horizontally, we are going to waste. And nowadays you look at a newspaper advertisement, no shared walls, larger privacy, one home per floor. And if you look at a landing of a staircase, there is so much of a landing in a staircase, they call it for so-called aesthetic reasons, whereas that landing portion will never be utilized. It will be a see-through space. So there can be ad nauseum, I can keep counting examples as to how we waste space. There are porticos where there are functionally unusable parts which come under a chajja, which come under the recess of a elevation, which cannot be used. Whereas that site has been so designed that it appears to somebody that that space is getting utilized. So to start with, economization of space, economization of functionality and economization of fitments. All three can give rise to a beneficial utility of whatever space is available by many. Now to this extent, the world over, nowadays they talk about reduce, refuse, recycle, regenerate, restore, reuse. Now a quick example of reduce, Mr. Pandya.
As I say, right from the space standard, same thing applies to the material. For example, how much less material can we need and do we need? And in that, reduce even means that undue consumption of resources. Just to give a very small example, what gave us liberty to say that even in a daytime, we would need to have lighting, electricity in a blank corridor where two sides are doubly loaded rooms in a hotel. So even May afternoon when there's enough sky component outside, we have to use electricity.
Beautiful.
So when we are saying reduce, we are talking about undue consumption of that. We are not wanting to compromise on any comfort, but undue consumption of that. What gave us a license to say that toilets and bathrooms should not be naturally ventilated? From the beginning, if we take for granted that it would be only running on mechanized services and energy intensive gadgets, that is the kind of liberty and assumption I'm questioning.
Now when we look at houses built by the British, I look at tall corridors, rooms where double ceiling heights were there for places like Nagpur where heat could affect them lesser. They had fixed see-through glasses, ventilators which can pass skylight straight away onto the hall. Whereas the modern man has started making false ceiling, and he will ensure that he reaches an abnormal height than what was originally well designed for, and certainly lose whatever light is naturally available. And the same concept goes on when you start designing buildings. One more to you again, Mr. Pandya. One quick example of refuse.
Yeah, refuse bidding. See, actually that should come the first, Sustainability starts with the way of life. If you don't need something, learn to refuse, then reduce whatever you need to consume, then reuse what you already have. After that you recycle and then you regenerate. So I think in that cycle,
Excellent.
refuse
Excellent.
is the first.
First, however, in military engineering services, what happens is that we work on something called standard scales. We work on something called what is a natural given. For a particular accommodation, this is given. For a particular type of a building, this is a given. So some standardization has already taken place. So there, right away to bring in sustainability, to my mind, reduce will come in first, but it's a matter of conjecture. Thank you. The point here about recycle, a quick example I will be able to give you. We had recently constructed the runways of Bhuj and resurfaced the runway of Pune airfield. So when we were doing the resurfacing of the Pune airfield, a lot of reconstruction and resurfacing work was taking place. At the time, we had to knock down multiply laid olden day PQC surfaces, pavement quality concrete surfaces, which had already given way, which had been in a dilapidated state. But then when we broke them up and when we removed them, they were high quality waste of PQC material. So we used them in a manner in which we could reclaim some depressions and give them a solidity in structural engineering sense to give them a proper pavement quality to come up with a supersurface of another PQC and use it. So rather to a major extent, I can say that not even a kg of that material went waste. It was recycled well within the whole process. So that is one example of a recycling. Now further examples we can go on to regenerate, restore and reuse. So one example of restoring, Mrs. Prabha Jain.
About restoring, sir?
Yeah. In sustainable development,
Yes, sir.
one of the themes that are
Yes, sir.
that you restore whatever is possible.
Yes, sir.
So one good example in your mind that
Sir, the very fact the older structures can be restored and they can be put into use for another function. It is one of the finest examples. Like Mr. Ethan Pandya actually came up with a example of that, of an existing building, how it was restored and how it was beautifully reused. So instead of really raising down the building and coming up with new structures, which is really, leaves a lot of carbon footprint, this is a better way of restoring.
excellent. I'll just take this on further. So what happens is that when you do a forensic construction analysis of a building, straight away you are able to see that A, B, C components of the buildings are very healthy. So recently what was happening was that there were a few blast pens that needed to be repaired where the foot of the blast pen, the flooring of the blast pen were very good. So my immediate point was that now this can be restored by only partial redo. So what the learned architect is bringing out is that there is no need to holistically look at a building and say destroy it, now knock it down and come up with something new. We should in the very beginning, we should sensibly look at it as to what can be saved and what needs to be removed and what need not be removed. So definitely that can form part of the whole planning process. Now coming to the concept of reuse, Mr. Pandya.
Yeah, there are resources which can be used as it is for another sympathetic purpose. For example, we had done one of the known building by Le Corbusier and turned it into a city museum because it was dilapidated, because it was not getting used. So now you put it to a sympathetic function. It now is adapting to a new use, as well as it is ensured to get maintained, etc., because of people and their life. So we have seen this through tradition, many examples. Buildings have been there for thousands of years, and it has very sympathetically and very smoothly adapted to the changing times without demolishing or without major restructuring. So the first thing is that, okay, even in terms of, like, we have this bottle now, after its use, can we use it as another sort of container? So the point is that it is the least energy in its transformation.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Pandya.
still can be used
Thank
for
you.
a good use.
Very well brought out. Now, gentlemen, you look at it that in a military engineering service building, you would have seen that there are a number of places where tiles are removed. All tiles don't go waste. Only the tiles which are so strongly adhered to each other, those corners may get irreparably damaged. But otherwise, definitely there is so much that can be taken out. Many times in our contract, we start using the word schedule of credit. Whereas instead, many of such materials, rather than telling the contractor to take away at a particular cost, can be stopped and can be reused. There can be uncut granite, madam, on pavements. Yeah. When you are removing it, certainly it has not gone waste.
Yes.
In my temples, you are saying that they have lived for 500 years. So all those uncut granite portions can be picked up and they can be used. Mr. Dojode, you would have seen in number of places, you would have seen that footpaths are there. You don't want a footpath here, you can be removing it. And don't you feel that if you use high quality paver blocks, high quality, so you can simply pick it up and use somewhere else?
Sir, it has been used in Headquarter Chief Engineer Southern Command building when 10-15 years before the restoration was going on. The old material was restored, recycled and reused also.
Excellent.
In the building.
So what happens is that quickly you take your mind. Why he spoke about Southern Command building? Just take your mind to that Pune, to that whole road, where onto the right side when you look at the buildings, you are finding that they are all vintage buildings.
Sir.
Many of the material is such which won't be available today. Even when you do the re-roofing of a Mangalore tiled roof, rather than remove it and bring in tiles from elsewhere which are certainly not going to be of the same standard, we can carefully remove the Mangalore tiles which are good and use it for paving the roof of a particular section and bring in the new tiles only for another section, rather than en masse remove all tiles and then go in for one more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very, very, very important point, because the moment we say about rewiring in a building, our concept is to bring somebody, remove all the wire. Whereas it may so happen that in that building, willy-nilly, in minor repairs, in a number of places, new wires would have been applied. Now, even if we are going to do rerouting and changing, etc., we can take out the wires, have a visual inspection and use proper testing and segregate the latest wires, and for lengths where they apply, where they lend themselves to be applied, it can be applied. So it can be endlessly constructed, extrapolated. The larger issue is to be wise, to make things sustainable.
Sir,
Pandya,
I wish to quote one example of reuse. We have reuse the old buildings which are in Pune. We have converted the usage of married accommodation to single accommodation of brigadier, major to brigadier.
Yeah,
and
I'll take this on. I
quarters
have got
also.
your point. So what you are trying to say is that even functionally,
Sir.
you can reuse space functionally. So nowadays you are hearing about partition walls which are not really walls. There are so many materials available which will give you the same look without much money, which can be relocated, which like creating modules. Mr. Pandya, you would have seen that in your exalted architectural career, you would have seen that 5-star hotels are having partitions where they can make a big banquet hall into mini 3 banquet halls, and at one time they will remove them and make them back into a large banquet
That's
hall.
where I think it has to be preconceived in design itself for its secondary use. So like you said, flexibility of divisioning. So you could convert that same space into multiple uses
Or
without
reopen the whole
exactly.
place. Now coming to this regenerate point,
yeah.
Mr. Pandya.
Yes. Now, regenerate is an added obligation in terms of not only you conserve, but you can actually generate. So, you can be the Vishwakarma in a way. For example, solar energy. So, you're using the resource and you are actually converting into an energy. Same way, vegetation, that you can actually plant the trees in a way that you can eventually use it as a resource. Same way, by recycling the water coming from the bathroom waste, etc., you are converting it into a resource.
So, Mr. Pandya, you helped me exactly as to where I wanted to steer the discussion to. In regeneration, in military engineering services, our immediate concept would be water. Water from waste can be regenerated by using STPs. Water from the bathrooms, washrooms can be properly used, and the soil water can be used separately. Water which is a rainwater waste can be taken to a proper sump and then used. Water which goes through 2-3 areas and then gets collected somewhere can be given a charcoal filter, made into a good water and taken straight away to a storage tank. Water which is much mired into soap or oil can be given a passage again to take it to a place where it can go through a cleaning tank and then come out as a better usable water for garden usage, not necessarily in STP. There are nowadays smaller modules available for just removing that kind of a waste. So, everywhere we just need to apply our mind in the pre-design stage so that we are able to come up with a better end product. So, now having guided the discussion thus far, when we say a no to what is not necessary, when we say a yes to whatever can be utilized, and when we use all waste that is available to make buildings, Mrs. Prabha, you would have seen that in places they use sometimes in an area where lot of cement waste is available, next to tile industries, Morbi, you will find so much of tile dust and tile stones available. Can you throw an example as to how it can be utilized?
Yes, sir. The usual usage is the broken tiles being used on the terrace for reflecting sunlight and
mosaic,
heat.
as it's called.
This is one of the
Beautiful
very common
point. It will allow you to walk properly. It will give an aesthetic feel. It will
Insulation.
give a super cover. It will give an insulation. It will lend itself to better washing.
Yes.
And it will ensure that there is lesser seepage. And it will also reflect heat.
Heat.
So, one beautiful example.
Just
Now,
on a
yeah.
lighter vein,
Yeah.
we have actually at Gandhi Ashram,
Yeah.
just to change the mindset, whenever we say toilet, we kind of close our nose.
Yeah.
We have actually used the used potties, the kind of pans as a seat, and we have converted the whole kind of recycled thing out of the bathroom waste into what we call the toilet cafe. It's called Pakhane Pe Khana. So
See.
there are many different ways.
Yeah.
Some
The
of these.
I am so impressed with your realistic example that you have brought in. When you had gone for making the building the city museum,
Yes.
Mr. Pandya, that I had heard of. So you had used a deteriorating structure
Yes.
which had very many uncoordinated services and which was seeing neglect and apathy,
Absolutely.
which was in a state of abuse, if I may
Very
dare
much so.
say
Very
so.
much so.
So how did you try to make it better?
Yeah, in fact, it was a resource, and it even had a kind of a landmark value because it was done by Mr. Le Corbusier, one of the only 4 buildings in the world with one city to have such a kind of landmark. So, but it was abused, like you very much said, and it had dilapidated, because of neglect and because of the wrong ways of utilizing certain things. So, our first idea was to restore and bring it to the original state and then put it to a sympathetic use. So, we found that this was worthy of depicting. When we say restore, it's also restoring the culture and ethos of the place. So, we thought that we could bring about what Ahmedabad stands for, and from different perspective of its history, architecture, culture, education, institution, individuals, etc. So it's one of the kind city museum in the country which was done through people's participation. So now people can visit, it can be looked after, and it would stand the test of time for times to come. So not only building is restored, but we have added a value to turn it into a museum of city of Ahmedabad.
Rather, ladies and gentlemen, this place is worth watching. it is a city museum, and what they have exactly done is that they have clearly identified whatever can be reused. They reused them. And they also clearly identified as to how to make them look more aesthetically pleasing.
And depict the sense
And-
of city.
Yeah, because the whole theme was very clear in front of them.
Right.
They wanted the theme to come alive, and they could succeed in making the theme come alive. The old bricks were depicted as old bricks. They were not given any artificial facade. It was only a question of, like I said, that from the dilapidated many, they segregated the best few, if I may
Very
put
much
it
so.
across, and they could achieve an end product. Now, if you look at the whole structure that has come up, they have not made each room reflecting another room. They have not mirror images. They have not made things that will be appearing on a drawing board as a singular cubical repetition, whereas they have gone for what fits each room with whatever is available in that room. It's a beautiful sustainable model. Sir, here you would have learned some lesson in that particular enterprise. Can you share a lesson that you could learn there?
First of all, with minimum, how could you transform it to maximum? So it's in a sense not even transformation but metamorphosis. Like the shell was there. So first one would understand the character of the place, and second, by design you add value. Design is all about value addition. So now you get information, you get involved in this, and you get inspiration. So that's a kind of holistic takeaway when you visit this museum from multifaceted perspective. And it was all done through participation of people. So when you involve people, there is always a resource that multiplies. So
Excellent. Sir, with your permission, I want to highlight here, Mrs. Prabha has been a forerunner who has been ensuring that most of the designs in my zone are done within the zone. When those who need the product participate in the product, like you said, then the product always comes out good. And one more point, what I wanted to highlight was, like Mr. Doishode, you would have seen that recently we had restored the officers' mess gates. So what did we do? We removed the huge gates, recycle it in the bazaar, and we could make a smaller gate of exactly the necessary dimension, and with the leftover material we could make pillars, and at pittance of a money we could actually come with an aesthetically more pleasing and more functionally appropriate gate system. Ladies and gentlemen, here we come to the conclusion of phase 1 on sustainable building construction. Soon we will move to the phase 2. Thank you.